Hi everyone, welcome back to Trees and Turtles. My name's Imogen. In today's video, we are talking about how to come out of your trauma more resilient. If you're not already subscribed, make sure to do that. Give this video a thumbs up, follow me on Instagram, and let's get started. So, trauma is a problem that almost everyone experiences at some point in their lives. Trauma can look like a severe physical or mental illness, a toxic relationship, losing someone you care about, an addiction, or something else. So, trauma comes in a lot of forms and can have huge impacts on our lives. So, what can we do to build resilience? Number one, you have to acknowledge that you're experiencing trauma. A lot of people don't actually acknowledge that they're experiencing trauma, and it's something that I've struggled with in the past as well, because I experienced so much trauma that I normalized it for myself, and I thought, this is fine, but it's not, okay? Living in denial is a form of gaslighting yourself. Once you understand that you're living through trauma, it becomes a lot easier to be kinder to yourself. And, if someone else that you knew was going through trauma, you wouldn't be like, you're making it up, like, it's not that bad, okay? So why do you do that to yourself? So acknowledge that you're experiencing trauma. Number two, look for ways out, okay? We do not want this situation to continue forever. If you feel trapped in a traumatic situation, and I've often felt trapped, so I understand this is often the case, make a list of things that would need to happen for you to escape the situation. Now, I'll be completely real with you. Some of the traumatic situations I've been in have taken me literal years to get out of, but having a plan helped me never lose sight of the end goal. Kind of related to point number two is point number three, and that is to know when it will end, okay? The certainty can really help with coping. If you can find a way out and you have a concrete plan to make sure that you are getting out of that traumatic situation, then having like a defined endpoint can really help you. Like, okay, this sucks right now and it's horrible and I'm feeling really traumatized, but there is an endpoint, okay? This can really, really help. Right, number four, educate yourself. So once you understand exactly how you're being traumatized and what's going wrong, it can be a lot harder for it to affect you, okay? Often bad situations feel really scary until we actually know what's going on. Like, for a good example is like a medical problem. You might be having a bunch of symptoms and you go to the doctor and the doctor's like, we don't know what's going on. Now, that's terrifying, right? Because if you went to the doctor and the doctor was like, yeah, it's this, and here's medicine, then you'd be like really reassured. But if you go to the doctor and they're like, we have no clue, then you're going to feel real sense of uncertainty and it is going to mess you up. That is another situation I've also been through. But once you've educated yourself, if you can find out, like, actually what's going on, like in your brain and in the situation, and if there's like a word for it, like a word for the situation you're going through, then that can actually help you to feel a lot calmer about it, because it feels like less scary because it's not unknown anymore. The unknown is often a lot scarier than reality, so educate yourself as much as you possibly can about your trauma. In the traumatic situation, I know this is hard, but insulate yourself from the trauma as much as possible. So what can you do to reduce your exposure to it? Even if you have to be in a certain situation, are there things you can do to make it more bearable or to start caring less about the situation? So insulate yourself from the trauma as much as possible. Positive coping strategies. Okay, let's talk about positive coping strategies, because so far everything's been a little bit negative, apart from the education point. But positive coping strategies, like during some really difficult times in my life, I made a special effort to do things which actively bring me joy and like peace. So journaling, being outside in nature, treating myself to ice cream, listening to my favourite music, okay? Like in really difficult situations, those small things can really give you something to live for, okay? They give you a reason to keep going, and honestly, they can be like lifelines. So practice some small things that give you joy, even in really dark and traumatic situations. So we're doing all of these things, but eventually, like I said at the start of the video, you are going to get out the traumatic situation because you have an escape plan, you have an endpoint, okay? You are going to get out the traumatic situation and your life is 100% going to improve. So what then? Because I feel like a lot of the time people get out of traumatic situations and they are like, okay, well, that's over, great. But it's not, because the whole point of trauma is that it has an effect on you, and it has an effect on you in the long term, okay, if you let it. So the final point, and this is really, really important, is to see a professional, okay? After periods of intense trauma, you need some kind of recovery. And yes, obviously, it can look like a lot of recovery on your own, but for me, this usually takes the form of therapy, and it has been so invaluable. Like, I'm a huge advocate for therapy on this channel, and I know it doesn't work for everyone, but if it works for you, it can literally save your life, okay? So if you merely survive and you don't process in any way what has happened, this can cause a hell of a lot of issues later on. Like, I've had so many issues due to unprocessed trauma, and genuinely, once I processed it, it actually helped me recover so much faster and to a greater extent than if I was sort of limping along trying to just function, but I've got all this unprocessed trauma and it's weighing me down. Okay, so please find some way to process your trauma, probably through seeing a professional. So that is all for this video. That's how to come out of your trauma more resilient. If you're not already subscribed, make sure to do that. Give this video a thumbs up, follow me on Instagram, and I will see you next time. Okay, bye.